Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Sports Lock Podcast. I'm your host, Ben Mostaller, and we are starting our NFC fantasy predictions on this episode, starting with the North, and then we'll go South, East, and West to finish it off. Getting closer and closer to fantasy football season. Drafts are starting to be scheduled. Preseason is right around the corner. It's going to be some of the best time of the year. I enjoy fantasy football season more than I do anything else. I study it and do all the research so that you don't have to. All you have to do is listen to my podcast and hopefully help you win your league. So again, NFC North today. If you haven't checked out my other episodes, they are on YouTube, Spotify at Sports Lock Podcast, and the AFC is complete. So make sure you check out those previews as well. And we're going to start with the Chicago Bears. The Bears finished 6-11 last season, which was third best in the NFC North, just ahead of the Detroit Lions. The Bears are looking to improve their young team this season in hopes of fighting for a division title since 2018. We start with the sophomore quarterback now, Justin Fields. Justin Fields finished quarterback 30 last season in 12 games, only 7 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, which was terrible. And then he added 72 carries for 420 yards. That was fifth best there in yards out of quarterbacks rushing the ball last season, and he did miss 5 games. Phil was on pace to finish right around a top 3 if healthy in rushing yards. Right now, he's going as the quarterback 19. If you add 8 more touchdowns and continue on his rushing pace, he would have been right around the quarterback 20 last season. So if you count into that, he's coming into a sophomore year, so he's got a year under his belt, coming off an injury, and I would assume he would look to be a better passer this season. I would put him right around that ADP. I think that's fair value. And before we get into a lot more, I just want to talk about ADP for those that are new to fantasy football, average draft position. And that's where they're averaging going in drafts. So a guy could be valuable at that ADP, right? I'd rather have, I don't know, just put in perspective, I'd rather have Justin Jefferson at wide receiver than I would a guy like Adam Thielen, his teammate. But which player has the better average draft position, meaning what guys around them where they're being drafted are better off. So not everybody is a terrible player. It's just they might be bad at that position. You're not going to go out and, spend, I don't know, you're not going to spend $600 on a $400 TV. But if you could get that TV for $320, you're going to do it because there's a good value. That's kind of how the average draft position is to me. It's all about value and where you can get this player. So taking off of last year, finishing quarterback 30, adding to what he was on pace for to be quarterback 20, you assume he's going to improve to what he was on pace for, and maybe even a little bit better, because I assume those touchdowns will be at least in the teens, and hopefully interception numbers will be right around the same or a little bit lower. But I think that he is an all right pick at his ADP. I'm not going to draft him, but if he's available and there's not many guys left at that ADP, he could be a backup and for somebody. But I would prefer other guys around that value instead of Justin Fields. But let's move on from Fields and go to running back David Montgomery. High hopes for him last season. He finished as a running back 20 with 849 yards and 7 touchdowns. Now, he did miss 4 games and could have been on pace for a 10 touchdown season if he didn't miss those games. Most likely, if healthy, he would have finished as a number 9 back in fantasy, which in 2020, he finished as a running back 4. So a lot of upside there. But besides Fields, Montgomery will have the touches on the ground. There's nobody there really fighting for any other touches. So it's going to be between those two. And he averaged about 20 a game last season. But his passing, his receiving game has gone downhill over the past few years. And I certainly don't think in PPR formats he's going to be as valuable. But definitely in non-PPR, more valuable. PPR, he's still there, but he's not going to get as many touches with Fields back there. But currently he's going as a running back 17, which I think is great value for Montgomery. We saw last season that he finished running back 20 and missed 4 games, and that he could have been closer to the top 10. The only negative that I see with Montgomery is that Fields is going to run the ball a lot. And how much is that going to affect David Montgomery? Again, 2 seasons ago, he was the running back 4. Last season, if healthy, probably around running back 10 in the top 10. So I think there's some upside that he'll do a little bit better than the running back 17. I wouldn't say that he's going to do a lot better. Maybe he gets running back 12, running back 13. I'll kind of look at it more when I do my rankings, but I think it's pretty good value if you can get him at that ADP. Now, talk about the wide receivers. They lose Allen Robinson, but they have Darnell Mooney, and he finished as a wide receiver 23 last season, 81 receptions, 1,055 yards, and 4 touchdowns. So he had 4 of Fields' touchdowns out of the 7. So that is pretty good, noting that they have a good connection there. Mooney now will be the wide receiver 1 after Allen Robinson again left for the Rams, which is going to help him in fantasy a lot. He has a lot of upside this season. This is a guy that I absolutely love this season, even though the Bears aren't going to be as good and Fields isn't the greatest quarterback. But I think he's going to have more receptions and hopefully a few more touchdowns. So let's just give him 2 more touchdowns off of his last season numbers and 10 more receptions. So 91 receptions, 6 touchdowns, over 1,000 yards. He's a wide receiver 12 right there. Currently, he's going as the wide receiver 25, which I don't understand because this guy did this last season, and now he has a second season in with Justin Fields, who should improve. Allen Robinson, who was the main wide receiver, gone. There's nobody else to compete with him. And if you look at the ADP, you got to look who he's going around. Chris Godwin, who probably is not going to play till at least week 5, coming off his torn ACL injury. That's risky. Michael Thomas hasn't been himself, always injured. And Tyler Lockett, who has no Russell Wilson this season. He's got to deal with Drew Lock. And this is in round 7 and 8 where he's going, Darnell Mooney. This is incredible value in round 7 or 8. This guy could easily finish as a wide receiver 10, top 10 wide receiver this season, as long as he stays healthy. And he has. So this is a guy that I feel is a safe pick. He's a reliable pick, and he should have a huge upside. And what we saw last season out of wide receiver 23 is like his floor, in my opinion. So if you can get him in the 7th and 8th round, which at that point, I'm looking to get another running back wide receiver there. This might change up my strategy of maybe taking 3 running backs earlier on, knowing that Darnell Mooney's there. But I love the value on Darnell Mooney. Definitely a sleeper for me at the ADP. And we're going to talk about my biggest sleeper a little bit later on in the podcast. Tight end Cole Kmet, he finished as a tight end 19 last season, 60 receptions, 612 yards. He has a lot of upside too with receptions, in my opinion. I think that, last season he had 0 touchdowns. I think he can get at least 2 to 4. So give him 15 more receptions, 3 touchdowns from last season. He jumps to the tight end 7. Now, again, this is just what you could give him, what I think he could do this season. He would have been in the top 10. Right now, he's going as a tight end 15. Again, great value, maybe a little bit too low on Cole Kmet. He has that potential starter upside with him. Definitely a tight end too. But it's there. I think he can finish in the top 10. And if you miss out on some of the top guys, he's a guy that I would wouldn't mind taking if I waited on not getting a tight end. So the defense, they're average. They're okay. What are the pros? Well, Fields will have another season to progress. The cons are the team is still young and inexperienced. Now, last season they went 6-11. I forget what I projected. I should have pulled that up here, and I will. But I think they go one game worse at 5-12. Why? They got a tough schedule. I think they can beat the Lions. I think the Lions I think they'll split with them. The Vikings, I think they'll lose to twice, and the Packers, maybe they'll take one from Green Bay. It's really tough to say. But I do think that they finish 5-12. I think that the Lions have a chance to finish third this season, barely. I know that's a lot to say, but I think they have a chance to do that. And last season, I had them projected at 6-11, which is what they did. So how about that? So if you're a sports bettor that's looking at over/under on wins, maybe listen to me. I got that one dead on accurate. But that's the Bears for you. The guy I'm most excited about is Darnell Mooney, especially at the ADP. David Montgomery, give or take, he's all right there. He's about where he should be going. Same with Fields. Cole Kmet could be another sleeper. That's the Bears. Now we move on to the Lions, who went 3-13-1 last season, which was their worst season since 2009. They also finished last in the division for the fourth year in a row. Now Jared Goff is hoping to give this team better wins here, get closer to 500. Last season, he finished as a quarterback 23. He had 3,245 yards, which wasn't that great. 19 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. And this was Goff's worst season since starting his career. And he continues to go down by year with touchdowns and yards. There isn't too much upside with Goff, I don't think. I think what you saw last year, he does a little bit better than. I think he gets 24 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, and maybe closer to 4,000 yards passing. But he continues to go down. Even when he was in LA, he still was going down the last few seasons. Right now, he's going as a quarterback 29, which I think is a little too low for Goff. Last season was quarterback 23. I think he gets to that and improves a little bit more to be closer into the top 20. But they're definitely at that point when you're drafting your backup quarterbacks. There's a lot of other guys with higher upside, higher ceilings than Jared Goff that you're going to want to aim for if you're going to take that risk for a backup. He's not your starter. So at that point, you might say, okay, I want a little bit more upside. So I'm going to take a risk on a guy since I already have a starting QB. That's where I think people would pass on Jared Goff because he doesn't have the upside as some of the other quarterbacks around him. And now Deandre Swift is an interesting fantasy play this year because last season he finished as a running back 15 and he missed a couple games. He went down after week 11. Up until that point, he was a top 5 fantasy running back. If healthy, he would have most likely finished as a RB5 or somewhere in the top 5. What's nice about Swift is he is very, very good in PPR because of his pass catching ability. 62 receptions, which was 4th best among running backs. 452 yards, which was 5th best. If he was healthy, he was on pace to finish 1st in receptions and close to that in yards, up where Austin Eckler finished. Now, they do have Jamal Williams, who is the better rusher, but I think that they're going to back off of Jamal Williams a little bit, knowing what Deandre Swift can do. And I think that that'll give him an uptick in his rushing yards for Deandre Swift. I also think that he can get more than 7 touchdowns compared to last year. I think he can get, 4 rushing touchdowns and maybe 7 to 8 receiving. Right now he's going as a running back 10, which I think is great value if you can get him there. For a guy that finished RB15, missing 5 games. He's got top 5 upside. We saw it last year, what he could do. Now, DeAndre Swift, he does battle injuries. So he is injury prone. So you have to take that risk. And I'm not so excited about drafting Jamal Williams as a backup. So again, I will look at the rankings when I compile them together and do the podcast. Swift will be somewhere close around that ADP. Some people take him higher. Some people take him lower. There's a lot of other great running backs going around him. Joe Mixon's there, who has that pass catching ability. Dalvin Cook, who's been a stud. So there's a lot of guys around Swift that it's like, ooh, do I really want this Lions guy that's injury prone? But we saw what he could do last year when he was healthy, and that's what you have to kind of base it off of, in my opinion. Good value at the RB10. I could see him going probably anywhere as a RB7, and then maybe as low as the RB12, not much lower. We're going to talk about wide receiver Amon-Ra St. Brown. St. Brown finished as a wide receiver 21 last season. 90 receptions, 912 yards, 5 touchdowns. Lions also add DJ Chark and former Rams teammate of the Goffs, Josh Reynolds. Now, St. Brown came alive in his last 6 games, finishing with all 5 of his touchdowns at that point. He averaged 8 catches per game and 93 yards per game, which was best for the wide receiver 2 during that span. Currently, St. Brown is going as the wide receiver 21, which is extremely too low for this guy. Again, we assume that Jared Goff will improve a little bit on those touchdowns last season. And I think that Amon-Ra St. Brown will have closer to 8 to 10 touchdowns, hopefully 1,000 receiving yards, and the receptions will probably stay the same. Now, there is concern that you add more receivers, so there's risk there. They get DJ Chark, Josh Reynolds, who are pretty good wide receivers, and DeAndre Swift will be healthy, and TJ Hogson will be coming back healthy. So there's a lot more targets to go around than last season, but I like the way Amon-Ra St. Brown finished. He is the clear number 1 wide receiver, in my opinion, in Detroit. And I think that he could have that potentially close to top 10 upside. So again, he's going around where Mooney's going. In my opinion, those 2 guys are who you want to grab in those rounds, 7th, 8th round, because that's great value with guys that have such good upside there that could finish both close to the top 10. Now, tight end Tj Hogson was a bust for me last season. I think he was going right around the 5th or 6th tight end spot, and he finished tight end 14. Now, he did miss 5 games. But if he was healthy, he was on pace to finish as the tight end 5. And again, this team wasn't healthy last season, but there are some good fantasy players on here if healthy. Right now, he's going as a tight end 7, which I think is great value, noting that tight end 5 was where he probably would have finished last season. And I think he's going to go right around there because the tight ends get slim after a few. So I see him going around there. I think that's good value for Hawkinson. Definitely a guy you'd be starting in your leagues. But again, I don't get so excited over this guy like I would have Mark Andrews or Travis Kelce. But that's when you have to look at the tight end spot and, okay, do I go ahead in an earlier round and take a guy like TJ Hawkinson, or can I wait a few more rounds and get a guy like Dawson Knox, Cole Kmet, Irv Smith? That's kind of what you have to look at. You got to see what kind of fantasy numbers you think they'll produce for you, if it's going to make a drastic change. If you wait, if not, then obviously you can rack up on more running backs, wide receivers at that point. But the Lions, they have the worst defense of the NFL. But a positive is that they have Goff for another season. Swift and Hawkinson should be healthy and improve this team, but they do have that bad defense. So last year they went 3-13-1, tying with the Steelers in a very disappointing game. Last year I projected them to go 2-15. So I wasn't too far off. I was pretty close there. So hopefully they improve. I think they'll be fighting for third in the division. Somewhere, I think it's going to be very close between them and Chicago. Probably safer to say Chicago, but I like the Lions' upside offensively. They have some very, very good players in Deandre Swift, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and Tj Hogson. Let's jump to the Green Bay Packers, who won their third division in a row after finishing 13-4. Now they do go into the season losing their best wide receiver in Devontae Adams, but they still have the great MVP in Aaron Rodgers. Let's talk about Aaron Rodgers. He enters his 18th season with the Packers. He finished quarterback 5 last season with 4,115 yards, 37 touchdowns, and only 4 interceptions, which was the best touchdown interception ratio last season. Rodgers isn't a guy to make mistakes. He doesn't throw double-digit interceptions, but he will go into the season again without Adams. So how's that going to affect him? I think he takes a slight decline, slight drop in touchdowns this season, maybe 32 to 33, but he's still a top 10 fantasy quarterback. Right now, his current ADP is quarterback 8, which is great value for this guy. He finished quarterback 5. He's been in the top 5 the last few fantasy seasons, but the receiving core isn't there. But Aaron Rodgers is a guy to make a no-name receiver core stand out and do great. So he's the guy that I would want on my team. And if I miss out on some of the top guys, which I normally try to get a top 5 quarterback, maybe I wait a little bit and get Aaron Rodgers. I'm not opposed to it. He doesn't have the rushing ability, but definitely a guy that's going to get you over 4,000 yards, 30-plus touchdowns, and not take away a lot of points with those interceptions. Now, the running back situation is between 2 guys, Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon. Now, Aaron Jones was the lead back last season and will be again this season. He finishes a running back 11 with 799 yards and 4 touchdowns, which isn't great. But he had 52 receptions for 6 touchdowns, and those 6 touchdowns were second best among running backs. A.J. Dillon, he finished the running back 22, 11 spots behind Jones, and he had 803 yards, so just 4 more rushing yards, 5 touchdowns on the ground, 1 more, and he had 34 receptions and 2 touchdowns. So that's where they differentiate there. Now, Jones has declined the rushing game since Dillon arrived, but his receptions go up, and I think that he'll be closer to 60 receptions this season with Adams gone. Jones has been reliable in fantasy as well, but is slowly dropping each season. Running back 2 in 2019, running back 5 in 2020, and last season running back 11. So almost a 7. You're looking at, like 3 spots and then I can't even do math right now, but 6 spots then. So he's almost doubling it there. 3, 6. Is he going to be 9, meaning running back 20 this season? Who knows? But right now, Jones is going at that ADP at running back 11, and Dillon is running back 32, which I like Dillon better at the ADP, as Jones is going around Swift and Chubb, and I would have to favor Chubb, and I would say slightly Swift right now over Jones, just because I think Jones and Dillon will share a lot more this season. But he's still a great running back, Aaron Jones, and it's because of those receptions. So definitely more in PPR. Non-PPR, he's going to be a lot lower for me, but in PPR, he'll be right around that ADP, which is fair value. Dillon at the ADP is much better as a backup. If Jones goes down, he has a lot of upside. Now, Allen Lazard, he is now the wide receiver 1 on the team with Adams gone. Lazard finished as a wide receiver 43 last season with 40 receptions, 513 yards, and 8 touchdowns, which was 8th amongst all wide receivers. Lazard should get close to half of Adams' receptions, in my opinion. I mean, there's other wide receivers there, but Lazard's going to be the guy. And Adams had 123 receptions last season, and he's always over 100. So give Lazard those receptions, just some of them. I think this season he's going to go up to closer to 80 receptions. Touchdowns about the same. And he had more yards to last season. He's a top 15, top 20 wide receiver in fantasy. And right now, after last season finishing wide receiver 43, he's being drafted as a wide receiver 49. They're saying he's going to do worse than he did last year when he doesn't have Adams to compete with him. This is a guy that had 8 touchdowns. The receptions very low. But those receptions, I think, are going to almost double this season because Adams' receptions of 123 have to go somewhere. They're not all going to go to Lazard, but the majority of them will as he steps into the wide receiver 1 role. And he's playing with the MVP quarterback in Aaron Rodgers. I don't see him doing worse than last year again. And right now, going in the 13th, 14th round, right before you draft your defense and kicker, is insane value. Insane. Now, they do have Randall Cobb, who finished wide receiver 68 last season, but there's really no other good wide receiver options. Lazard is big. He's a good target. He's got good hands. So I think that Lazard should be and will be the biggest sleeper in fantasy football this season. I will take him a couple rounds ahead of where he's going. And in an auction league that I'm in, I will definitely pay a little bit more for Lazard. And I think he's going to be down, if you're in a $100 league, near the $4 or $5 range. I'd go up to like $8, closer to 10 for Lazard, because he just has that great upside. I think last year was his floor. And if he finishes as a top 20 wide receiver, I am not surprised at all. Love me some Allen Lazard this season, and you should too. Now, tight end Robert Tonyan was set for a big season, but he got hurt halfway through with a knee injury. Starting off the season on the PUP list and hopes to return at some point this season. In the meantime, they have Josiah DeGuaro and Mercedes Lewis. Now, the ADP for Tonyan is 21, which I think he's just too risky right now. Watch for him on the waivers. He does have good potential to finish as a top tight end, like a top 15, top 10 tight end. We've seen it before, but he would need to do a lot this season. And of course, that injury is concerning. Now, the defense is average. They're still a good football team without Adams, but can they fill those shoes that Adams leaving behind? Last season, they go 13-4. This season, I think they do 2 worst. They go 11-6. I just think that, they are going to decline slightly, but still a playoff team. Now, again, I said that they went 11-6 last season. I project this year they go 11-6. Last season, I thought they would go 14-3, 13-4, very close there. But the Packers, draft Rodgers. You're going to draft Aaron Jones, and if you get Jones, make sure you get Dillon. But Dillon also has some fantasy value without drafting Jones. So if you want to screw somebody out of a backup there, the safety valve there, then go ahead and do that. Allen Lazard, very deep sleeper. And other than that, that's about it for the Packers that I would draft. Let's move on to the Minnesota Vikings. And the Vikings finished 8-9 last season, which is also what I projected, and second in the division. They will look to win their first division title since 2017. Now it starts with quarterback Kirk Cousins. And Cousins finished as a quarterback 11 for back-to-back seasons with 4,221 yards, which was ninth best amongst quarterbacks, 33 touchdowns, which was seventh amongst quarterbacks, and 7 interceptions, which is great. Cousins has been very consistent. He's a safe guy, and nothing is saying that he's going to fall this year. He's got his wide receivers back. He's got his team around him. Right now, he's going as the quarterback 15, which I think is great value for a guy that is just reliable. He's not going to run the ball. He's not going to have that upside, but he's going to be a top 15, right around quarterback 10, anywhere from quarterback 10 to quarterback 15 each season. Now, the running back situation is interesting here. Dalvin Cook and Alexander Madison. Cook is the main back, of course, in Minnesota, and he finished as a running back 16 last season with 1,159 yards and 6 touchdowns. Cook went down from the past 2 seasons where he finished as RB2 in 2020 and then running back 6 in 2019. Cook concerns me as well because he does usually miss games due to injury every year. And I think that Madison will take some carries away. Madison finished as a running back 34 last season with 491 yards and 4 total touchdowns, which isn't much, but still, he's not going to run Cook off the field. And I think that Cook's going to have close to 10 touchdowns, which if you would have gave him 10 touchdowns last season, that would have been good for running back 10. Right now, he's being drafted way too high, though. The current ADP is running back 3. Again, just way too high. He can get there. He has before. Running back 2 just 2 seasons ago. But I think he's more likely to finish closer to the running back 10. 16 last year. He finished 6. So I'm thinking running back 7, 8, 9. He'll finish around there. So I don't like the value of running back 3, but if I could get him as the 7th, 8th, 9th running back, I'd be all right with that. Madison is running back 46, which I think is a little bit too low for him. I think he has more value at the ADP. Running back 34 last season, they're saying he's going to do 12 spots worse. I don't see it happening because I think that he will get a little bit more looks, about the same amount of touchdowns. So if you're drafting Cook, you're going to want Madison. But again, kind of like Dillon, he does have somewhat of some value, especially if Cook goes down, but some single value as a backup. He's not my favorite backup running back like, Kareem Hunt and AJ Dillon. But he is definitely right around there as a good backup running back. Now we got to talk about the wide receivers, and Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen lead the way. Jefferson has been one of the best wide receivers in the last 2 years that he's played. Wide receiver 5 in 2020, wide receiver 4 last season, 108 receptions, which was 4th best, 1,616 yards, which was 2nd best behind Cooper Kupp, and 10 touchdowns, which was 6th best. Adam Thielen, he finished as a wide receiver 28 after finishing wide receiver 9 the year prior. 67 receptions for him, 726 yards, and 10 touchdowns, which was 6th best. And this was the 2nd season with Thielen getting double-digit touchdowns. Now, the current ADP is Justin Jefferson, wide receiver 5, and Adam Thielen, wide receiver 34, which to me, Jefferson is a better value at the ADP because he improved over the last 2 seasons. And if you get him at wide receiver 5, he hasn't finished that bad. And nothing says he's going to go downhill. He's been very valuable, very reliable over his 2 seasons. I also think Thielen has a good value at his ADP, but if you can get Justin Jefferson as your 5th best option as a wide receiver late in the 1st, early in the 2nd round, you're not going to be disappointed. Finally, tight end Irv Smith Jr. Irv Smith's played in 13 games last season, 30 receptions, 365 yards, 5 touchdowns, which was tied for 5th. This was good for tight end 23. Now, Smith has some upside, but I don't think he has as much upside as where you take him too early. He's going as a tight end 6, which I think is fair. He's a guy that I'd be drafting as a backup to my starting tight end. I think he does a little bit better than last season, but not much better, again, to really boost him into me saying that he's a sleeper. But he's going around other guys where you compare each other. That's where they should go. So again, an all right backup tight end. Last season, the defense was good. They have the same team coming back with high power offense, which is great. But the question is, can they pull out these tough wins this season and improve? I think they can. I think they win the division. I think they go 12-5. I think they improve by those 4 games, which will really make a difference. I like their schedule. I like some of their tougher games being at home. They have the ability to go 12-5. I think they at least win 10 games. They have the ability to win the NFC North. And if they finish out, I expect them to do. Again, I think they finish 1 game better than the Packers. Packers, though, are the safe play to win the division, but I kind of like Minnesota as a threat to win that division. So a quick recap is that I like a lot of sleepers in the NFC North, starting with Alan Lazard, Darnell Mooney, and Amon-Ra St. Brown. Very great wide receivers that you can get later on in drafts. I also think that the running back situation is interesting. Aaron Jones, definitely a guy you want. Dalvin Cook, a guy you want. Deandre Swift, a guy that you want, all going around the same ADP. And I might favor Swift over all of them just because of the pass catching ability. But again, when you see my rankings, you'll know, and that will be up in about a month right before you draft. I think it's the second to last week of August that I'll have that episode up for you. That'll be very valuable. I'll also go over my sleepers and busts, as well as hopefully maybe do a mock draft or go more into the auction style podcast where I talk about value, how much money I'd spend in auction draft strategy. So I'm coming up with other things, trying to have a big week there. But if you enjoy fantasy football, I'd appreciate the love and subscribing and liking to my YouTube channel at Sports Luck Podcast. You can also find me on Instagram at Sports Luck Podcast for updates on there. And hopefully I'll get to some viewer questions eventually. So if you have one, if you go on to the latest episode on my Instagram post, just comment any questions you might have fantasy football related. And I will help you out as much as I can. So thank you guys for watching. Again, if you haven't watched the AFC videos, go ahead onto the channel and do so. If you're watching on YouTube, you'll get to see the PowerPoint. If you're not watching on YouTube and you want to look at the PowerPoints, go onto YouTube. If you don't want to look at the PowerPoints, go to Spotify at Sports Luck Podcast to watch. Next week, we will have the NFC South for you, and we will see what happens there as news today broke of Julio Jones signing with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. How will that affect the fantasy numbers? Where do you draft him? All that will be with you next Tuesday, so make sure to tune in. Have a good one, guys, and thanks for listening.